So the Marvel Cinematic Universe has sure had some great and not so great bad guys. But despite the sort of dubious quality of their characters sometimes, you cannot argue that they are not super powerful. So in that vein, I'm gonna go ahead and rank the most powerful among them, from the smallest to biggest threats. And note that I am talking about pure power level here. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. The ability to deceive people is a massively powerful thing to be able to wield, especially if you are capable of tricking large groups of people all at once. That is why Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, is on this list. This guy's illusion tech is so good, built off of Stark Industries' barf tech, that it managed to convince people that he wasn't just a Weasley, no-good con man, but actually a fully fledged superhero, on par with people like Iron Man. It even had Peter Parker duped, and he would have probably stayed oblivious to Beck's deception if not for the fact that he took out one of Beck's projectors completely by accident. But as powerful as Mysterio's illusions were, they were just that. Illusions. He didn't actually wield any real power, unless you count that granted to him by Edith. He was just some dude. Just a dude who gets this spot squarely at the bottom of the list. Let's go on from someone who masquerades as some kind of wizard or sorcerer to an actual sorcerer. Kaecilius, the main antagonist from the Doctor Strange solo movie. A former student of the Ancient One, Kaecilius was someone who could have very easily been a shoo-in for the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme, if it wasn't for his unquenchable thirst for power, which led to him turning to Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension, putting him and his followers at odds with the rest of the sorcerers in Kamar-Taj. So yeah, he's definitely a major threat, especially for someone like an inexperienced Doctor Strange. But why, if he's so powerful, is he so low down on this list? Well, it's quite simple really. He's basically just a glorified goon. See, Kaecilius' power is tied intrinsically to Dormammu. Heck, his entire existence is. Just look at how easily he was ripped away from reality just because his boss made a deal. Kinda knocks him down a few pegs in regards to being a big, frightening bad guy. Aldrich Killian might seem like an odd entry to have on here, considering that we didn't really get much of a look at his powers in Iron Man 3, not to mention the fact that the movie that he appeared in didn't exactly set the world on fire. But Killian is a bit of a powerhouse when you start to think about it. Not only does he possess all of the powers that come with being a subject of the Extremis tests, including the ability to generate a great amount of heat, allowing him to do stuff such as spitting fire like a goddamn dragon, but he's also hyper intelligent and charismatic to boot. Both of those things allowed him to amass an army of followers, all of whom themselves were powered by Extremis, meaning they can literally rip Iron Man armors apart with their bare hands. This is someone who, if it wasn't for the fact that Tony Stark had an obsessive need to build a metric butt-ton of armors and then link them all together, could have very easily become an Avengers-level threat, especially if his final plan was able to come to fruition. Don't believe me? Just look at the fact that Tony Stark spent the entirety of Iron Man 3 right up until the end of the movie getting his butt absolutely handed to him by Extremis troops. You can't tell me that someone with followers like that wouldn't be able to stand toe-to-toe with other Avengers as well. Malekith the Dark Elf is a lot like Aldrich Killian in several ways. And no, I'm not referring to the fact that his movie is often considered one of, if not the worst movie in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. This list isn't about passing judgment on the quality of the movies that the bad guys are from. No, I'm mostly referring to the fact that his power largely comes from the fact that the dude has an entire army at his disposal. And it's not just any old army. This is the Dark Elf army, an ancient force that once rivaled the power of Asgard itself. In fact, in modern times, we even got to see it besiege Asgard as Malekith attempted to claim the Aether for himself. And once he was able to get a hold of the Reality Stone, he was able to hold his own against the God of Thunder in a one-on-one brawl, only really being beaten by science of all things, something that he didn't see coming. Yeah, this is definitely a major threat. Maybe not the best villain in regards to writing and all that, but power-wise he is a force to be reckoned with. Before he was the guardian of the Soul Stone on Vormir, spending his days spitting out the most cryptic crap this side of a hermit Jedi Master in hiding, Red Skull was the first proper supervillain that we saw in the MCU, chronologically speaking at least. The result of a failed attempt at producing a super soldier, Red Skull is basically on par with Captain America in terms of strength and speed, which is scary enough for a bad guy, but he is also a powerful general within the German military during World War II, and the head of Hydra, the premier anti-freedom terrorist organization within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The epitome of villainy. So if you take all of that and put it into one neat yet terrifying package, you get a hell of a bad guy. One who can both send an army after you if he feels like just sitting back and chilling, or beat the snot out of you himself if he wants to get his hands dirty. It's a really good thing that his ambition blinded him to the dangers of using the Tesseract incorrectly. While everyone was looking for Mephisto within WandaVision, being absolutely sure that the devil himself was responsible for all the craziness going on in Westview, the real villain was right under our noses the whole time. The nosy neighbor Agnes, actually Agatha Harkness, an ancient witch in possession of inconceivable amounts of power. Now, a single witch might not seem like that much of a threat, considering that we've seen heroes take on sorcerers and such a couple of times at this point. But Agatha had long ago mastered the ability to absorb the powers of other magic users, such as when she took out her entire coven, including her own mother, all while she was tied to a stake. This granted her a massive boost in power, and allowed her to stand toe-to-toe with Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch herself. Agatha also had her hands on the Darkhold, an ancient tome that, if anything like its comic counterpart, is the key to a lot more dangerous things. And even though she was defeated by Wanda, she is still around within the MCU, meaning the door is open for her to take part in more magical shenanigans in the future. Okay, so the fact that Surtur is on this list shouldn't really be all that surprising. He's a giant fire demon with a big sword who's prophesized to bring about Ragnarok and destroy Asgard. And guess what? He did just that. After Loki dropped his skull in the eternal flame, the big guy got back into action and made quick work of the realm of Asgard, wiping it out and leaving it as nothing more than some rocks floating through space. So yeah, he's crazy powerful, and definitely deserving of a space on this list. However, he gets a spot firmly in the middle, due to the fact that before being combined with the Eternal Flame, he was pretty easily beaten by Thor, who simply hit him with Mjolnir and called it a day. Not exactly the most threatening baddie around. Okay, so Loki might be far more of an anti-hero than a straight-up villain at this point, but he has served as the main antagonist of 2 movies, one of which was a full-on Avengers team-up, so I think he definitely counts as a bad guy. Loki is someone whose magical power is only eclipsed by his cunning and ambition. As we saw in his solo series, Loki will always cause trouble and will always wind up being a threat to the universe, no matter what is different about him in any specific version of the multiverse. This is someone who has lofty goals, usually involving conquering some realm or another, or in the case of Sylvie, taking down the TVA, and someone who has the powers and intellect to do so. On several occasions, this guy got pretty close to achieving what he wanted to do, which has got to count for something. But of course, the combination of the Avengers and that pesky conscience of his always got in the way. You know, I get that the idea of building an artificial intelligence made up of all your society's greatest thinkers and then putting it in charge of your people might sound like a good idea on paper. But Captain Marvel showed us how that brilliant plan can go horribly wrong. Okay, there are a lot of ways that it can go bad, but you know, that's not really what I'm talking about here. The Supreme Intelligence wielded total control over the Kree Empire, and it doled out orders to the Kree military based upon its own twisted ideas of logic and reason. Able to react to new information as fast as you would imagine a giant supercomputer would be able to, it is an extreme threat to all who would oppose it, which, unfortunately, is Earth and all of the heroes that stand for justice. While Carol Danvers may have won a small personal victory over it in Captain Marvel, in theory, it is still out there, still in control of the Kree. So, more than likely, the Supreme Intelligence will come back as an antagonist again at some point, maybe in Secret Invasion or the Marvels. Those would be the 2 places that I would probably think would make the most sense for it to pop up. Ultron has to be the prime example of wasted potential within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Seriously, what we have here is a bot that could have very easily been the biggest, baddest bad guy of them all. He's a robotic being that was capable of infiltrating anything with a computer within it, and as such he had access to literally all of the collective knowledge of the human race, making him easily the most intelligent thing on the planet. In addition to that, he also could not be killed as long as he had access to something like the internet, as he would simply upload his program to the web and survive regardless of whether or not his physical form was actually destroyed. And yet, like so many other MCU villains, he was taken out within the course of a single film, not really allowed to be the threat that we all knew he could become. Ah well, at least he got a little bit of redemption in this regard with the appearance of Infinity Ultron in What If. Though even he got taken out far too soon if you ask me. Now this is the part of the list where we leave the more terrestrial enemies behind and move out into the cosmos, as the cream of the crop of the villains within the Marvel Cinematic Universe can't really be found on planet Earth. Especially not this guy, as he really wouldn't fit. His avatar might, but you know, he is a literal planet. Ego is a celestial. At least that's what he claims in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, meaning that he is effectively a god, or about as close to one as you get within the MCU. So naturally, when he revealed himself to be a villain, he was immediately a pretty massive threat to the entirety of existence. And he probably would have succeeded at taking out everything and everyone, if not for the fact that the Guardians of the Galaxy knew exactly where his planet was, and was able to get access to his core, where they were able to take him out, thanks in large part to a souped-up, god-powered Star-Lord. If they weren't there though, or if they just didn't even know that he was a planet in the first place, it's pretty easy to imagine how much worse things would have wound up. It wouldn't have been pretty. Of all the Asgardian gods, Hela has to be one of the most powerful. More than likely second only to Odin himself in terms of what she can do. So the fact that she is pretty much pure evil isn't exactly what you want, but Hela has a solid weakness, in that her powers are tied intrinsically to the realm of Asgard, meaning that if it were to, get Ragnaroked, she would pretty much be donezo. Of course, it also means that while on Asgard, or in the realms connected to it, theoretically, she was more powerful, making her conquest of the realm fairly simple for her. So I guess thank God for the giant fire demon and all that. Kang could very well be the most powerful being we have yet seen within the MCU. As someone who has near total control over the flow of time, not to mention the ability to turn a massive, matter-consuming cloud of pure nightmares into his own personal pet, there is a serious argument that could be made for Kang topping this list. However, he's not going to go on the top spot. And do you know why? Well, it's simple really. He's yet to do anything. Outside of what I've mentioned already, pretty much everything we know about Kang is based upon what we know about him from the comics, which is admittedly a valid place to start when discussing the MCU. I've certainly done it enough myself. However, as we have seen with characters all across this massive media franchise, the good people at Disney and Marvel haven't always stuck rigidly to the source material. So while Kang in the comics is certainly not someone that you want to mess with, we don't know how his powers will stack up on the big screen. So I'm gonna have to put him here. Maybe in the future he'll move up a spot or two, but for now, number 3 makes the most sense to me. I really don't feel like I have to say much about Thanos. He was not only the first being to ever wield the combined power of all 6 Infinity Stones, but also the first bad guy to ever really win out against our heroes, achieving his goal of removing half of all life in the galaxy from existence and leaving the Avengers with quite the sore spot. And on top of that, he was crazy powerful even without all the stones. With only a handful of them, he was able to do stuff such as kicking the snot out of the Hulk, holding off the combined forces of the Guardians of the Galaxy and some of the most powerful Avengers, and literally ripped the last stone out of Vision's solid vibranium face. So yeah, the dude's no joke. But if he's so powerful, how come he isn't the top spot on this list? Well, there is one who could very well be a bigger threat than even the Mad Titan himself. You'd have to imagine that it'd take a lot to legitimately scare the Ancient One. Someone who possesses more magical ability and knowledge of just everything than pretty much anyone in the Marvel Universe. And yet, Dormammu, Lord of the Dark Dimension, had her so frightened that she turned to using black magic to keep him at bay. Now you might be thinking to yourself, hey funny video man, Dormammu ain't nothing. Doc Strange had him handled easy. And yeah, but that was when he had an Infinity Stone. Guess what he doesn't have anymore? Dormammu is a massive multiversal threat. And if Dormammu were to hatch another scheme to try to take Earth again, there really isn't exactly a lot that could be done to stop him. I mean, sure, Doc Strange could try to make a deal with him again, but then he'd probably just spend another like 10,000 years or whatever getting vaporized or stabbed or all other manner of things. Hey there everybody, I'm John Aljets. I made this video, and I want to know what you think. What would your ranking of the most powerful baddies in the MCU look like? Let me know in the comments below or shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more great videos just like this in the future.